Let's talk a little bit about your book, Unmade. It breaks down the decade from 2010 to 2020 in Australia's media landscape. Maybe you could kind of give us a high-level overview, catch us up on what happened over that decade from your book, and also how that might have some relation to what's happening in the US.
I guess the idea occurred for the book. I suppose the timing was actually possibly even before the pandemic started. But I just had this thought that we'd had this really interesting decade, if you can call 2010 to 2021 I guess it's a 12-year decade. So I kind of wanted to tell the story of how Australia's media had got there, which is obviously a global story as well, because, you know, there are plenty of global players here in Australia too. And then so much of it once the publisher accepted the idea, that was how the book Media Unmade came about. And then the hardest thing was actually finding a way of telling that story that wasn't really dry and textbook. So I ended up sitting just to my left of where I'm sitting in my office now with this giant cork board on an easel where I kind of plotted along the top each medium and then down the side each year, and with tiny little bits of index paper, you know, all of the significant events till I had maybe 200 events. And then, you know, honestly, it was, I guess maybe what I hadn't appreciated is there's a lot of structure building before you write a word. And then off to my right, I had a whiteboard where I tried to create effectively a 3-act structure, just like you would for a fictional story, to kind of tell all of the interconnecting stories. And that's the thing, you know, in Australia, like anywhere else, there are so many interconnecting stories where, you know, you'll have the Murdoch family, and you'll have, you know, Lachlan Murdoch leaving the company and going off and starting his own business where, you know, he ends up running a very successful radio network in Australia before coming back to the family. And by then, you know, the purchases he'd helped News Corp make in real estate publishing was what was making the company safe, you know, and so on. So you had so many sort of strands and themes that it was really a question of finding ways of telling those stories and making the most of the fact that I'd been reporting them myself.
What's the wrong way to tell those types of stories, historical stories?
I think one of the risks is it's such an interesting world. So not to get lost in the dryness of the numbers, you know, to find a way of using those numbers to illustrate a wider point. And, you know, often, you know, numbers are a great way of telling a story. And
give us a few points from the book that you've sort of thought through.
I suppose a few of the sort of themes that came through, and one of them we've talked about already, is the pendulum. Absolutely, the book. And it's one of those things, it's only when you sit down and look at the trends that you really realise what was coming through. So it was in the process of writing the book that I really realised we'd seen this sort of pendulum swing away from advertising-supported media to consumer pays media, whether it was on video streaming or news. So that was one. Another key one, which definitely a trend we've seen repeated in the UK, maybe not so much in the US, but maybe you can tell me that, is public service broadcasting being under threat. You know, so we've certainly seen the trend here in Australia, and at a distance I've observed it in the UK as well, where whenever you tend to have a right-leaning government, they tend to be quite confrontational with the public service broadcaster, particularly when they do news, and that funding ends up under threat. So that was a theme. We get, I guess one of the sad things is, as we speak in 2022, the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, has never been weaker, really. There's recently been a change of government in Australia who've given a bit more funding, but, one of the great Australian cultural institutions has really been weakened over the last few years. So that has been a real trend of kind of confrontation, and you've got this, and you can't rule out News Corporation or News Corp's role in that, because News Corp has traditionally been quite skeptical or hostile towards public service broadcasting around the world, and then of course often tends to have the ear, particularly of when governments lead to the right. So you have this kind of what I describe in the book as the thruple from hell in News Corp and the government and the ABC, where there's just this really dysfunctional relationship between the three of them.
Is there any silver lining you can leave us with?
I think the way in the way the book told the story, I guess our ending, as much as it was this news media bargaining code coming through, and suddenly guaranteeing the certainly short-term and medium-term funding of journalism from the big end of town. So, it was kind of a happy. It was a complex and grubby happy ending, but it was kind of a happy ending.
Please like and subscribe so the YouTube algorithm will show our videos to more people. Also join our Substack newsletter for exclusive updates, or if you're on the go, find us wherever you listen to your audio podcasts. Click on one of the links to find our next video, and also check out the links below for more information. Thanks so much for watching.